forgetting offenses, in spite of injustices or wrongs done to us, continue on in faith and even joy with forgiveness. Work for peace and an end to war. Comforting the afflicted. Jesus brings us comfort in our affliction as we try to comfort others in theirs, especially in our houses of hospitality. Praying for the living and the dead. Dorothy kept a list of people she wanted to pray for in her prayer book. May we pray for those most in need and ask Dorothy's intercession for them. Amen.
Thank you, Louise. And again, welcome everyone to the National Catholic Worker Zoom conference. My name is Michelle Nar Obed, and I'm a community member at the Hildegard House Catholic Worker in Duluth, Minnesota. My role tonight is to share the thoughts and discernment process that has led us into this conference, to introduce the panelists for tonight's session, and to set the tone for how we will hope to approach tomorrow's first roundtable discussion. So I want to start first by recognizing our incredible organizing team. We have Joanne Kennedy, Kim Williams and Steve Baggerly, Brana Casanenglada, Rosalie Regal, Sarah Fuller, and myself, and again, Matt, who is our tech expert. We'd like to acknowledge that we regret in having to take a more orchestrated approach to this conference, to the point of even having to make a few executive decisions. We know that this has made a few people unhappy, and we're really sorry about that. But this technology has kind of limited our ability to have a more spontaneous and inclusive decision-making process that we would traditionally have in in-person gatherings. So having said that, how did we come to this? Most Catholic workers know that for many years we've met regularly for regional, national, and international gatherings. And we come together for many reasons. We come together to share stories, to support each other, to learn from each other, for clarification of thought. That's one of the 3 platforms that Peter Morin envisioned in the creation of the Catholic Worker, and to pass on the Catholic Worker legacy to new people exploring communities and to connect them to the wider movement. By midsummer, it became clear to us in the Midwest that we would not be having our regular Sugar Creek gathering because of the COVID-19 issue. In Dorothy's time, great ideas came from sitting around the kitchen table and talking. In our time, this idea for the conference, great or not, came from sitting around the internet, and Rosalie suggesting that maybe we try to gather by Zoom. And so from there, that's where it came together. We pulled a small core group to plan and organize the conference. And why do we think that this is important? Well, we felt now more than ever, we really needed to be together in the presence of the Spirit to discern what it means to create the new society in the shell of the old, and to create a community where it's easier for people to be good. Those are not just words or concepts. This is our life. This isn't just a job, it's our vocation. And so we're tasked with this at a time when we are facing what often feels like overwhelming existential threats. We're facing the potential political, economic, and social collapse of our country. Some of us may call that the collapse of our empire. We are facing dire threats to our Mother Earth, who sustains and nurtures our very lives. We're facing the loss of species at unprecedented rates, which is resulting in the loss of natural checks and balances against viral and bacterial invaders, resulting in diseases as we are currently experiencing now with COVID-19. We continue to experience threats to life from technology and from weapons of mass destruction. Are these any worse than what our ancestors faced during their lifetime? I don't really know, but they had lessons that they learned from facing the crises of their time, and those lessons are available to us if we listen to the Spirit. We're in a time of great change. that change is going to happen with or without us human beings. Our Mother Earth can shake us off just as easily as a dog can shake off a flea. So maybe the human species will be here for this great change, or maybe we won't. But in the meantime, we are here now, and we have this tremendous legacy of the Catholic worker, which carries all the teachings of our ancestors. We have the principles of the Catholic worker handed down to us by Dorothy Day and Peter Morin and the early Catholic workers, and they're recorded for us in the aims and the means of the Catholic worker. And those teachings were passed to them through the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. And before that, they were passed on through Moses and the prophets of old. And before them, all the great ancestors, the angels and saints, and the endless cloud of witnesses. All of this given freely to those of us struggling to listen with humility and those of us who hunger to live for the common good. We have found that these teachings are often best passed on in the telling of our stories. So tonight we have 3 people who have dedicated their lives to living these principles and remaining faithful to the spirit which animates them in their work as Catholic workers. And we ask them to share their understanding of the principles that we share in common as Catholic workers and how those principles are manifested in their daily lives and work. Before I introduce them, I want everyone to have in mind the 3 questions that we included in your registration form, because it's with the insights that come from the panel tonight that we hope to address the questions tomorrow in our first roundtable session. So those questions are, how are Catholic workers digging into our roots to work with other movements that are led by people of color and youth, for example? How are we responding to the presence of deadly weapons at protests? In the midst of a collapsing society, how are we preparing for the new society within the shell of the old? So with that, I will introduce the panelists who will be sharing their stories and addressing the question, the traditions and principles of the Catholic worker, what holds us together? Each will have about 15 minutes, and then we will open it up for comments or questions from anyone. So I'll start by introducing Robert ELLSBERG, a longtime publisher of Orbis Books. He was part of the Catholic worker community in New York from 1975 to 1980 and served for 2 years as managing editor of the Catholic worker. After Dorothy's death, he edited Dorothy Day, Selected Writings, and later edited The Duty of Delight, The Diaries of Dorothy Day, and All the Way to Heaven, Selected Letters of Dorothy Day. At Orbis, he has published many other books by and about Dorothy, and he just edited a new edition of On Pilgrimage, the 60s, which will appear next spring. He serves on the historical commission appointed by the Archdiocese of New York to prepare her cause for canonization. Following Robert, we'll have WILLA BICKHAM. WILLA and her husband, Brendan Walsh, started the Viva House in 1968. Their community is going on 53 years. The Catonsville 9 draft board action was in 1968. Dorothy Day and the 9 members of their families were their first guests. Viva House continues their long commitment to hospitality and resistance. In 2016, Brendan and WILLA published their book, The Long Loneliness in Baltimore. Brendan's essays and WILLA's art provides an account of what they have seen in West Baltimore over half a century. WILLA is a mother, grandmother, and retired pediatric nurse practitioner. With this brutal plague, more than ever, WILLA writes, we know our need for community and the love that comes from community. And following WILLA, we'll have Alice McGarry. Alice is one of the founders of the Mustard Seed Community Farm and Catholic Worker. She gets excited about so many things that often she doesn't know where to stop and start. Alice is a fiddler, a potter, loves beauty, justice, sincerity, art, ecology, and working outside. Since she encountered the Catholic worker movement 22 years ago, she has been trying to be a Catholic worker and has been trying to be a good farmer for the past 20 years. She is also editor of the elusive Catholic Worker Farmer publication. So with that, I turn it over to the panel, And Robert, you are up first. He's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's better.
Excellent. And if I can just, excuse me. There we go. Okay. Good evening, friends and fellow pilgrims. I'm honored to be invited to contribute to this conversation, which is obviously a rather strange and unfamiliar kind of gathering. The circumstances might remind Dorothy of the great flu pandemic of 1918, during which she served as a nurse trainee in Brooklyn. Though I think she would be mystified by the technology, I tend to think that Peter Morin would find it cool, in contrast to Dorothy's lengthy and meandering on pilgrimage columns. I think his essays were possibly intended for the era of Twitter and TikTok. Although I spent 5 years at the Catholic Worker, it's been 40 years since I left St. Joseph House, so I really don't dare to speak to you as any real representative of the movement today. But as Dorothy used to say, the Catholic Worker is, among other things, a kind of school where people might come to find their vocation, and certainly it played that role for me. It's actually 45 years since I first arrived at the Catholic Worker in 1975. And if we were to go back 45 years before 1975, we would find ourselves in 1930 in a world in which the Catholic Worker did not yet exist. So if we slightly adjusted the time clock and go back to just 1935, I think we'd recognize many of the distinctive elements of the movement we all know, but it would feel in many ways as if we had entered a very foreign world. It took a while for the distinctive shape of the Catholic Worker to emerge. The early issues of the paper dealt largely with strikes and evictions and labor struggles. Peter's original ideal was that houses of hospitality should be operated out of every diocese. I'm not sure that he even imagined that such houses would be the focus of Catholic worker life. The farming projects came later, and it was only with the Spanish Civil War and later World War II that the workers' unambiguous pacifist vision was articulated. It was only the 1950s, after the arrival of Ammon Hennessy, that the movement, that this commitment to peace was translated into nonviolent direct action and civil disobedience. By that time, I would say that most of the familiar elements and features of the Catholic Worker had come into focus. That being said, in contrast to a time travel visit to the early Catholic Worker of 1935, whenever I visited the Catholic Worker in recent years, by which I basically mean Mary House in New York City, it's pretty much exactly the way I remember it 45 years ago. Of course, I haven't visited that many communities, and they all have their specific qualities, but I think it's remarkable how consistent the worker style and vision has remained over so many years, especially when you consider that this reflects the power of ideas, not any charter or centrally managed franchise. They're characterized by a spirit of functional anarchy, an abhorrence of regulations, and a basic tolerance for people of all backgrounds, the result being an assemblage of characters possibly drawn from a novel by Dostoevsky, a similar cast of pilgrims, scholars, and holy fools, the young and old, workers, loafers, and everything in between. But essentially, all Catholic worker communities are pretty much defined by their identification with a basic vision that was part of the original DNA of the movement. Because DNA is a rather un-Catholic worker word, I'll reach instead for a metaphor with strong CW pedigree, namely soup, that staple of Catholic worker cuisine. I shall speak of the recipe for Catholic worker soup, understanding that real Catholic worker soup has no actual recipe. It depends on what is in the pantry and how far you have to stretch it. But I think it is this unwritten recipe passed down along from generation to generation, learned from practice and experience, that is the secret of the worker's relative longevity, 40 years now, since the death of its second co-founder. I believe this recipe involves 3 basic ingredients combined in different ways, depending on the preferences of the particular cooks. I would say that the first ingredient, very obvious from the prayer with which we began, is the message of Matthew 25. I was hungry and you fed me. I was homeless and you sheltered me. The essential foundation of the Catholic worker is the insight that Christ comes to us disguised in the needs of our neighbor, the hungry, the sick, the homeless. From this insight comes the practice of the works of mercy, which have always been a foundation of Catholic worker life. The famous bread line, the literal soup, the clothing room, the house of hospitality, all of them follow from this foundation. Now, of course, this insight and this practice are not unique to the Catholic worker. Countless religious orders and movements have taken on this mission based on the same insight about the presence of Christ in the poor. You think of the Daughters of Charity, the Vincent de Paul Society, the Missionaries of Charity, and so forth. But here comes the second major ingredient in the CW recipe. That is calling attention to and protesting and resisting the system, the culture, and the values that give rise to so much poverty and need. The need for this additional element was evident for Dorothy in her childhood reflection on the saints. I often like to quote her line, "Where were the saints to change the social order, not just to minister to the slaves, but to do away with slavery?" In effect, Dorothy answered this question with her life. It was the answer to the famous prayer she offered at the shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, prior to her meeting Peter Morin, that she might find a way of integrating her faith and her commitment to social justice and the cause of the oppressed. It was the integration of faith and a commitment to social justice, that was originally the distinctive feature of the Catholic worker message, I think, standing on the side of the poor and the workers against the predatory capitalist system, the bosses, the captains of industry, the profiteers, the exploitive landlords and financiers who were profiting from the misery of the masses. The Catholic worker set itself against a system that produced so much hunger and misery. The system today has evolved in many ways since the 1930s, the time of the Great Depression, but many aspects of the underlying system and its values and culture remain the same. It's still a rigged system that works for the primary benefit of those on the top. The general condition of inequality is even wider than it was in the early years of the Catholic worker. It's still a system that places more value on profits and short-term gains than on the well-being of human beings or the good of the earth. And as Peter Morin emphasized, it was necessary also to look at the culture and values that underlie this system, the acquisitive and consumeristic instinct, the value on individualism rather than community, competition rather than solidarity. Today, that system is largely driven by industries that threaten the survival of the earth, whether through war or climate change. The Catholic worker issues a protest against such a culture and system and the values it honors. The Catholic worker combines these two elements, the works of mercy based on the recognition of Christ and the needs of the poor, and a stance of protest and resistance toward a system that creates so much need, so much injustice and violence. You could describe these two ingredients as the combination of charity and justice. And that in itself, if it's all that Dorothy had contributed, would mark a very significant legacy. But I believe there's also a third major ingredient, and I think this is actually Peter Morin's great contribution. That is to point to and try to model an alternative future, an alternative culture, animated by alternative values. Strikes don't strike me, Peter Morin used to say to Dorothy, responding to her inclination to fill the paper with news about protests and social struggle. He meant that it wasn't enough just to shout loudly about everything you were against. You had to proclaim the message of what you were for. And that meant, first of all, trying to live by the values you were proclaiming. Peter didn't say his goal was the downfall of the industrial capitalist system. He said he wanted to build a society where it was easier for people to be good. What did that mean? I think it meant a society organized around different values, solidarity and community rather than competition and individualism, a society based on systematic generosity and kindness and hospitality rather than systematic greed and hostility. Of course, part of his practical vision was the deindustrializing of society through the establishment of farming communities, or what he called agronomic universities. And I know that many Catholic workers carry on valiantly with this element of his program. Dorothy acknowledged that most of the Catholic worker farms operated more as houses of hospitality on the land. But I think in our time in particular, the wisdom of Peter's vision takes on a different focus. I think his attention to the land points toward an ethic that puts us back in touch with the earth in what Pope Francis has called an ecological conversion. it seems unlikely that many people are going to establish toeholds on the land, but the Catholic worker, through Peter's vision, has always maintained this vision of a culture that is attentive to the earth and heeds its life-giving lessons. In the midst of the Depression, the Catholic worker never set out to take care of all the unemployed, hungry, and homeless people in New York, but it set out to model a different kind of society based on mercy, community, sharing, and to point out what society would look like if these values became the basic organizing ethos. The alternative society gives priority to the human scale, the person. It deplores bigness for its own sake. It rejects the marketing of distraction, the seductive charms of glamour, the worship of efficiency and speed that hurries us along to the next point on the assembly line and prevents us from seeing and valuing the person who's right before us. From St. Therese and the saints, as well as from the Gospels, Dorothy learned that this alternative society can begin exactly where we are today at this moment. It is expressed in voluntary poverty, in community, in hospitality, in personalism, in nonviolence. All these are part of that effort to build a society where it is easier for people to be good. Now, when most people think of the Catholic worker, they think first of all of the works of mercy, the soup lines, the houses of hospitality. And as people become more aware of the Catholic worker, they also learn about the protests against nuclear weapons and militarism and social justice. In other words, they know the Catholic worker by what it does and what it opposes. But those who understand it best also recognize the third ingredient. They recognize the Catholic worker not just in terms of what it does and what it opposes, but in what it proposes. Peter Morin always said that the prophet does not just denounce everything that's wrong with the world. The prophet also announces an alternative, a world governed by justice, mercy, community, and love. And it was Dorothy's and Peter's instinct that this alternative was not some pie in the sky ideal for the future. It was an alternative that we could make visible in the here and now. It was possible, to borrow the old IWW phrase, to build a new society in the shell of the old. Now, of course, the relatively small Catholic worker, even at the zenith of its influence, whenever that might be, could not all alone set the standard for these projects and causes. And that's why Dorothy spent a considerable amount of her time and energy calling attention to allied movements and initiatives. In the case of the works of mercy and care for the poor, she gladly recognized the work of people like Mother Teresa and her missionaries of charity. She didn't fault them for failing to address social issues. She supported the impulse of all those who gave bread to the hungry, who visited the prisoner, who cared for the sick and infirm, whether as individuals or as families, as parishes, communities, or congregations. In the case of the struggle for social justice, she continued to give support to labor struggles and other movements for social reform, but she particularly favored movements that rooted these struggles in a broader moral and spiritual perspective, such as the civil rights movement, or on the labor front, the United Farm Workers. You all know that Dorothy's last arrest, of course, came on a UFW picket line. She entered alliances with the peace movement and the struggle against nuclear weapons, and in particular the Vietnam War. She identified most closely with those activists and resistors who weren't just opposing a particular war, but were trying to be true witnesses to peace and who embraced nonviolence as a comprehensive philosophy of life. And she showed great interest in those who were exploring alternatives in economics, such as E.F. Schumacher or the experiments in village socialism in Tanzania. The work of all these friends and allies were featured in the Catholic Worker, so that the movement was also a clearinghouse for information and relationships with all those working in a similar spirit or direction. It's not time here to contemplate how all the circumstances in our society compared to what Dorothy and Peter faced in the 1930s. Together, they brought together their own particular life experiences, their differing talents and points of view, which is how the best soup is made. Everyone brings what they have and they toss it in the pot. But they devised a synthesis that responded to the needs of their moment and which amazingly continues to respond to the needs of our time. I believe these are the basic principles and values that have sustained the movement for almost 90 years that may carry it into the future. Peter died 71 years ago. Dorothy died 40 years ago this month. But there's lots more soup where they came from. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I don't think I'll ever eat soup again. And thinking, I'll always think of this when I eat soup. Thank you for your insight. So next, we have Willa. And Willa, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm unmuted. I think that,
Okay,
can you hear me?
yes.
Good. Is that right, Liz? What are you doing? She's giving me a signal. Oh, hello. I think that Alice and I can just move away because I think Robert covered all the bases of the Catholic worker as far as I'm concerned. What do you think, Alice? That was excellent. Such a good, you have something to offer the Catholic worker that I don't. I mean, it's this beautiful writing. I mean, you've taught the world about Dorothy Day, and Rosalie, all your books on the Catholic worker, and Louise, you've certainly written about the Catholic worker. Anyway, we were trying to figure out what brings us together, and I think for the older Catholic workers that I've met from all the different retreats, the words of Dorothy, we have all known the long loneliness, and we have learned that the only solution is love, and that love comes with community. So I think it's loneliness, love, and community that brings us together. For more than half a century, workers at Viva House have grappled with Dorothy Day's understanding of loneliness and her only solution, love. The loneliness appears in many forms. There is nothing lonelier than an evicted family, an addict with no community, a beggar on the street, a teenager who can only make money as a corner boy, a worker without a job. We never believed that loneliness should have the last word. There is a simple solution. We believe in the common good. We work together for the good of everyone. No one is entitled to more than he or she needs while others lack necessities. We believe in the Catholic worker principles, doing the works of mercy and resisting the works of war and violence. This is what holds us together, I believe. And this year we can appreciate this loneliness even more because of the Corona-19 virus. We have a new president, but the same systemic problems. And I think that Matt's going to put up a silk screen that our community did. Not that one, Matt, it's the one with the problem stem. In 1976, the country celebrated the bicentennial, and our community did this silk screen. And at that time, the only way to do words was to take a mimeograph sheet, which those over 40 can probably remember. And so in the background of this that you can't see so well, there are the words militarism, racism, sexism, capitalism. These are the isms. These are the systemic problems that Dorothy taught us and that we work through each day. So the beginnings of the Viva House in Baltimore. In 1967, we worked some months at the Catholic Worker in DC, St. Stephen House, with Dave and Catherine Miller. Dave and Brendan were friends from college. Brendan and I married during this time. We moved back to Baltimore and worked on the trial of the Baltimore 4 draft board action in downtown Baltimore, and then planning the Catonsville draft board raid. When we found a house in Baltimore to begin, we wrote to Dorothy Day. At that time, houses didn't have their own papers. Dorothy put news of your new house letter in the paper. The New York paper said, you know, these people, Will and Brendan, are starting this house in Baltimore. Matt, I think you could take down the silk screen. Dorothy then sent us the Catholic Worker mailing list for Maryland to get us started, and $1,000 to begin. She asked Pat Rusk and Andy Crushel to come and help us get this vacant house in some order. It had been vacant for about a year, but the furnace and all worked, so that was good. So they came, and then in October, we only had that work done for about a month. 1968, we opened up the Viva House with the Catonsville 9 as our guests. We were delighted to have Dorothy Day with us for the trial. We had spent time with her at the Peacemaker Retreat in Tivoli. The works of mercy. Often people, wait a minute, I just skipped something. I skipped our daughter. When Kate was born in 1969, Dorothy wrote a letter and said, you know, Will and Brendan did a good job, but you know, this is not a life for families. We think that she didn't believe that it could work with having families and the Catholic worker houses together. But obviously from these days, from these photos, from all these people in this attendance here, obviously the Catholic worker is filled with families and children, lots and lots of kids. The works of mercy. Often people ask, what have you done all these years and why? There is a simple reply that usually satisfies the media and the bean counters. We provided more than 1 million meals for our neighbors, served as temporary home to over 3,000 women and children and men, distributed maybe at least, well, I know at least 400 tons of food, or more accurately, we returned the stolen goods to the people. We have a wonderful community who works with us, some for decades. One was Sister Marie Kimball. Sister Marie Kimball spent at least a year in New York Catholic worker, and she was there when Dorothy Day died. She came back to Baltimore after that to live with her community in this old sister's home. But in the Catholic worker paper, Rick Rector wrote, Sister Marie was with us at Mary House in 1980 and was here the day that Dorothy died. Sister, trained as a nurse, was able to wash and tend Dorothy's body shortly after her death. Tamar, Dorothy's daughter, was also here when she died, also there in New York, obviously, when she died, and was extremely grateful for the tender way of Sister Marie in preparing Dorothy's body. Now, Sister Marie was a real character. She was a school sister in Notre Dame. And she worked with us until she died, and she was a treasure to us all. She dressed up with some of the others for the holidays. We howled Halloween that Marie came to work at the soup kitchen dressed as J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez. She had on tights, very short, and a very short snug skirt, a flash top, huge earrings, and a serious hairdo. We do have fun. We have planned many protests, had some arrests, and done home liturgies, weddings, baptism, a confirmation, funerals, and many a party and concerts at the house. We absolutely love having the Dorothy Days plays here. And Charlie King did so many concerts for us. His music has really helped us through this isolation and loneliness of this stay at home for us old people. We love the years when we had Dorothy Day after school program and a summer camp and a playgroup. These were great years with our daughter and son-in-law living in community with us. Dave did a law practice in our backyard. A local reporter quipped that he was doing backyard justice. Now he's a federal public defender, and Kate's a teacher, and they have 3 kids. They moved away just 6 miles away from us when the 3rd child was born. It's a rough neighborhood. It was in the paper last week that our zip code 21223 has the highest murder rate and the highest poverty rate in the state of Maryland, not just Baltimore, but you know, we 50% of our houses are vacant. The streets are a mess. So the children have grandchildren have been certainly part of Viva House all these years, and to this day. Let's see, maybe Matt, would you show the Housed in Dignity? This is another community. There was another community member, Jean Miller, who was one of the most intelligent and cultured women we have met. She loved opera. She spent a lot of time on the street. One of her favorite things was to go around collecting cigarette butts. She ended up on the streets when her parents died and she had no family. And isn't that a story we've all heard so often when you're just left alone in this whole world? Jean loved helping Brendan with the research he did on homeless women, even as she stayed the night outdoors downtown. She went with Brendan to testify before Senator Gonzalez's Committee on Homelessness in the US Senate. She spent most of that time, well, I mean, she paid attention to what Brendan said, but she spent most of the time, she got real good cigarette butts down there. She always had a little poem or gift from the streets for Kate Walsh Little. Jean experienced what was wrong with our system. She ended up on the streets. She had money. That the painting I did of her is her sitting in her bank doorway. She had money, but she was too sick to be able to withdraw it and to use it. It's a story we've heard before. But it's our hope that we accomplish more than these deeds. We try to adhere to a spirituality and philosophy of the Catholic worker. We try to be neighbor, not agency. We are a place for discussion, clarification, and resistance. In Ireland, they say it is necessary to fight both the famine and the crown, which is to say, hospitality and resistance, as Dorothy taught us. We think we do kind of a good job with some of the works of mercy. I'm afraid to say this in front of the Houston house, but we, at least on the East Coast, we felt like the Atlanta Open Door did all the works of mercy. We were good at some, but they were the ones who did them all. And we mourn and grieve the loss of Murphy Davis. Oh my God, it's so, so hard in this city. Ed can't, he needs his time together. So we are very, very happy, and we encourage you to buy Murphy Davis's book that she wrote just before she died. Our house, Viva house, is very small. We just are a row house. Actually, we have 2 row houses, but we do what we can. It seems we have done little to change the world or even our neighborhood. We call our neighborhood Soweto, which is after in the 70s, after Soweto. Soweto is Southwest Township in Africa, South Africa. We are Southwest Baltimore. Soweto was in 1976 a great uprising. The government decided that Afrikaners were to learn Dutch and English, not their own native tongue. And the students just rose up. 176, but maybe up to 800 students were shot and killed during that uprising. So we always honor the name of Soweto. Just once, I think, in our lifetime here, we had a visitor, a teacher from Park School, who's always very good to us. Anyway, and just what I said to him, you know, I could see this smile on his face, and he had lived in Soweto, so he knew a lot more than I did, obviously. We have even more homeless people than we started. When we started, we could sit on our stoop and see the people coming from all the little factories around us, which don't exist anymore. Nobody had much, but everybody had something at least. Now that's not true at all. We've had a lot of problems in our city. Our president city council has taken over the job of mayor because our mayor is in prison, indicted for graft. The police commissioner, who was responsible for 3 murders in our neighborhood, he got caught on, it's always he didn't file income taxes, that kind of stuff, but he just got out of jail. Our gun task force all have been indicted, and they're all in jail. The city is going to pay out millions of dollars to the families that were caused trouble by the gun task force. And we have surveillance cameras all around us. We have a drone overhead, drives me crazy. And on our streets, we have these, on the street lamps, we have these boxes and believe it or not, they are to listen for gunshots. So almost 10 days ago on the next block, we read in the paper that there was a shooting. And as far as I know, the person didn't die, but multiple shots. And the police were there quickly because they heard it on their computers, these machines they have on our street lights. It's hard to have such surveillance. There's been about 300 to 350 murders in our city each year. We have 600,000 people in the city. 4 on our block, 23 in our zip code so far this year. They say you can get a gun in West Baltimore a lot easier than you can get some food. And it's interesting with all this surveillance. Malcolm X always said, and I could tell you, if you want to know where the drugs are, you ask the kids, ask me. We know where the corners are, and we have an open air drug market here. So Brian Smeaton of Belfast, we've been very associated with our sister community in Belfast. He says about the work in Northern Ireland, we did the best we could with the information we had at the time. So that's what I have to say about Viva House. We've done the best we could, but I don't know, 53 years. Works of resistance. Michelle, am I okay at time? Are you going to give me a signal? Okay. We recall some fine protests during the 70s and 80s, like the White House pray-ins. At that time, you could go into the White House on a tour. We'd pick a room, kneel down, and start praying, and they would arrest you. Now you can't even get in. Then the bombings in Cambodia, that was because of the Cambodia bombings. We joined Phil Berrigan and other Baltimoreans at the Pentagon to smear blood and ashes. In 1983, we celebrated the anniversary of Dorothy Day's birth by gluing truthful words on top of fallout shelter signs on various buildings in the downtown area. We chose the Federal Building, the Catholic headquarters, the city courthouse, and the Basilica of the Assumption. You know that Baltimore's the first diocese. It was a simple deed. All we needed was a ladder, strong glue, and our new fallout shelter sign. The new sign read, "Nuclear war, no shelter, no escape. Nuclear war has no cure. It can only be prevented." Strangely, nobody was arrested. Phil Berrigan was with us as we plodded through the downtown. At the Basilica, Phil glued the sign over the fallout shelter sign. One of the caretakers was really ticked and said, how would you like it if someone put that sign on your house? And of course, it was great to ask Phil because he said he and Liz at Jonah House already had that sign in their window. Phil and Liz were with us through all the protests if they weren't in jail. They always showed up. We have some funny stories of some of those times together. I was very much involved in the women's movement and organized retreats with Peg Averill, our local community of women. We didn't know much about ourselves at all. We had just come off the Vietnam War movement, and those guys had us doing all the shit work. We didn't get to do much. So we got ourselves together. During our shelter years in the 80s, we did a lot of local protests with the poor. Sleep-ins, street theaters, sit-ins at the housing department. We got to know the deputy commissioner of housing, who became one of our best friends. And then the housing department started making casseroles for Viva House. We stood for 17 years. Liz, back me up on this. You stood with us, you and me, stood for 17 years on Mondays in front of the Baltimore City Jail to protest the death penalty. We do have a moratorium on the death penalty. There are lots of groups working on it. It wasn't us standing in front of on Mondays, it was a lot. A lot of applied physics lab arrests, and one after the other. Well, one Martin Luther King Day in 1987, you, Frida Berrigan, were part of this protest with your brother. You were 12, your brother was 11, Jerry. Kate was 17, and so our three kids were arrested and taken to juvenile court. Nothing much happened. Anyway, Kate got thrown out of she was in high school, got thrown out of the National Honor Society because she had set such a bad example. Now, this is the same high school that Nancy Pelosi and Barbara Mikulski went to. So I thought she was setting a really good example, but, and today, of course, we support the King Space 7 Plowshares with Liz McAllister with us tonight. And we joined the Black Lives Matter protests and certainly protest all the police killings. I have to say, though, that we have not joined in with all the young people. We cannot distance ourselves with that at all. We've only gone to protests where we could wear masks and stand 6 feet apart. So we were with the older folks doing Black Lives Matter and that kind of stuff. But I know our work, your work, is certainly not over. Now, Catholic worker art. This is my final. Art has always been an important part of the Catholic worker. Behind me is Tom Lewis's etching The Ghetto, where Christ is hung on between the telephone posts in the ghetto. Fritz Eichenberg, Rita Corbin, Adi Bethune, Brian Kavanaugh, Sarah Fuller, Liz McAllister, and so others have done so much art. Dorothy told us to look for beauty even in the squalor of the streets. David Simon and Ed Burns of HBO The Wire in the Corner were our friends of ours living in Baltimore. And I'll be less than humble now to say that David Simon liked my work. He quoted, to quote him, "And there on the walls of the dining room, I encountered some of Willa Bickham's art, but no platitude need apply within those silk screens and posters, not at all. There is comfort in Willa's work, and many of the images in their book offer great warmth and encouragement, but there is as well an argument to be heard." Thich Nhat Hanh said, "A work of art can help people understand the nature of their suffering." We have art all over our house, and I have to say, people pay attention to our neighbors, come in and take a look. We have done a lot of silk screenings together as a community. I have done many watercolor paintings, but none nearly as good as when I painted with my dear friend Liz McAllister. Those were the years that we were the most creative and did the most beautiful work we've ever done. And Liz and I are having a hard time being apart from each other right now. I miss her so much. The beauty and tragedy of sharing a lifetime with our West Baltimore neighbors inspires all the art I do. The works of mercy and the works of resistance are the themes of my work. So in conclusion, Dorothy Day has said that the solution for loneliness, poverty, and violence is love, and it can only come with community. We know here in Baltimore at Viva House 4 generations of neighbors. They are old friends. We have watched each other's families grow up as we grow old. It has been quite a ride. We are winding down. Now we only serve lunch from out in our backyard to go on Wednesdays and do a food pantry. We like to have parties and look forward to the day we can dance on Mount Street and celebrate a new president and a new vaccine. And as long as our health holds up, and as long as we can lift the steaming pots, we will continue. I'll tell you right now, there's only one of the two of us who could lift the steaming pots. Alleluia. Yes, indeed. Alleluia. May the Catholic worker thrive. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Willa. Thank you. What a history. Okay, so Alice, you're up next. You can unmute yourself there. Can you see where the mute button is? There you go. You're unmuted.
Hi, I could see the button. It wouldn't listen to my finger. So hold on. I'm going to share some pictures with everybody. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I can't see myself. I'm going to trust you can all see me.
You're great.
I wish I could see that you could see me. All right. I'm going to try not to put my words in front. Everybody, my name is Alice. I'm a farmer and a Catholic worker. I live here on the ancestral lands of the Iowa and Meskwaki people in the center of Iowa, in the center of the United States. This is the land I'm trying to learn from, to love, and to farm. Super honored to be asked to speak tonight with these wise and experienced people. I feel like the kid on the grown-up panel, but I'm going to trust I have something to contribute. I was very nervous about being last, so I wanted to get done and relax, but now I'm excited because the both of you before me said like everything I wanted to say, and Robert in particular like framed yeah, kind of my thesis here, so that's nice. Yeah, it's great because I was really stressed about trying to get everything I wanted to say in 20 minutes because I want to say a million things. Also, I'm really worried about running out of time. But I also, yeah, hold on. I want to, give me a second. I got to fix my computer. No, it's not gonna happen. Okay. Somebody tell me if you can't see me. Okay, so I'm worried I'm gonna run out of time. So I want to outline what I want to talk about first and then talk about it more if I actually have time. So the first thing I want to talk about is something vital I love about the Catholic worker, which is personalism. And if you don't know about personalism, a starting place to think about it is just the inherent dignity and sacredness of every person. And then 2, I want to talk about economics. So this big question, how do we learn from each other and imagine economic systems based on personalism or equal dignity for all? And this, again, is kind of like what Robert's saying, like the projective sort of besides the resistance and the works of mercy, but also like, what is this new world we are trying to create together and with so many other people? So number 3, Catholic worker farms. I'm here as a Catholic worker farmer. And so I think that's the space that we inhabit, that that creative edge of experimenting with alternative, more just economics. All right, and then I want to talk about farming, because I think some of you maybe don't live on farms and maybe don't think about farming as much as I do, and because I care about it a lot. And then finally, I'm just going to kind of go through some pictures on our farm of what it's like, some examples of economics, and then if I get to it, what's hard and what gives us joy. So starting right off with personalism. And so the sacredness of every person is kind of the core of personalism. And then from out of that, we get then the holiness of all of our encounters with each other. And also that we are all empowered to affect the world. And then from that empowerment, we have this responsibility to try to do good with our agency and power. And so I'm going to take that, I want to expand the idea of personalism past the human person and to kind of all of gen. So in my new personalism, every speck, every piece of the universe, every creature, every place is sacred. This was the overall theme of Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si, that all of creation is in the image of God, that neither people or any part of creation is, but each is inherently, profoundly meaningful, valuable, and holy. See, I was going to set a timer so I didn't get messed up. I just started it now. Sorry, everybody. So anyway, for me at least, I just, personalism is meaningful to me. And I think this kind of is, from out of this flows all the other Catholic worker things. Though I think they all just tie together, and all the Catholic worker things kind of flow into each other. But out of this, then we have solidarity, resistance to systemic oppression, nonviolence, works of mercy, and the economic ideas. So, let's see. So this is the question I want to kind of hold in our mind throughout this. And again, thanks, Robert. This is kind of like, what is our imagination? What is that society, the new society in the shell of the old? So instead of greed, competition, exploitation, systemic oppression, how can we have a personalist economics? And just want to express a little gratitude for all the teachers and mentors and just all the community in my life, all the wonderful support that we have around this community. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about farming. And and if you are like, oh, I don't want to think about farming, just think like, this is a rural life I live, and a lot of you aren't going to be doing things on this scale, but I think everything that I'm talking about, like, these are little things that we can bring into all of our lives. I think that there is a renewal or a excitement about growing food and crafting in our city houses also. But I live on a farm, so this is my framework. I'm going to define farming as any human intervention in the ecosystem to create more food for humans. So it's pretty big definition there. So we're just going to go back and imagine a pre-farming time on our planet. And so we have this planet, which is wildly diverse with infinite variety of landscapes and ecosystems. And they're all abundantly complex, full of life, and productive. And then in equal diversity, humans all over this planet adapted to the lands and ecology and also started to alter the landscape to encourage a more abundant food supply for people. Through observation, creativity, and innovation, people came up with brilliant, sometimes, oh my gosh, somebody just texted me. Okay, sorry, I'm so flustered so easily. Okay. Through observation, creativity, innovation, okay, we came up with, oh my gosh, okay. People came up with brilliant, sometimes terribly destructive, sometimes wonderfully fruitful techniques, skills, wisdom, and knowledge. We've made many mistakes and learned from some of them. But today we have agriculture experiments happening on a grand scale, and many of us are avoiding the lessons being offered. I just want to express my gratitude to all the farmers who have come before us, for all the hard work, attentive care, and creativity they offer us, and to all the farmers around the world who are continuing with this care. I think it's smart to learn wisdom and techniques from diverse traditions, but I don't think it's cool for white people to act like we figured them out ourselves and then copyright them and make lots of money off of them. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit more about farming and our food system and our industrial food system. Okay, so this is where I live. I live in Iowa. This is what the majority of the Iowa landscape looks like in November. We have really great soil here, and the shape of the land makes it easy to work with big machinery. Pre-European, so before European colonization, the majority of this landscape was covered in tallgrass prairie, and then smaller amounts of oak savanna, wetlands, and a little woodlands. Since colonization, most farming here has been on an agricultural trajectory of tillage, simplification, and chemical inputs, leading to where we are today. And this has not been an accident. It's been an organized, concerted experiment backed by government, education systems, industry, and propaganda. Many of you live in different landscapes, and your food systems might look different. And we are, it might be causing some different harms, but a big thing that's going on, just the wide scale exploitation of immigrants, women, people of color, the poor, and children throughout the world. Again, I just want to make really clear my deep respect for farmers around the world and all my neighbors, and know that they care for this land and are balancing tough decisions, and that we all need support and help if we are going to change direction or try new ideas. Okay, so here we are, just walking across this landscape. That's the mustard seed farm there. And I just want to show you this so that you can kind of see that our farm is a little small farm in the middle of a big landscape of industrial farming, and that we are a little bit unusual where we live. So there's a story that we've been told in the Midwest for a long time, and this is that we are feeding the world. This is a really, really important story to farmers in the Midwest. We care about the world. We're aware that there's cost to industrial farming, large scale erosion, pollutions of our waterways with pesticides and fertilizers, increased flooding, public health concerns, a huge carbon footprint, loss of wildlife, but maybe it's worth it because we are told that this is the only way to feed the world. And I just want to say, it's not true. Okay, so now we're just walking, getting up to the farm, and here we are at the corner of our farm. And what I do want to say, there are an infinite number of ways to feed the world, and absolutely we can grow more and better food per acre with less harm to our planet and even sequester carbon. The flip side of that, it does require more farmers. Okay, so holding these questions in our mind, what could economic systems and farming systems look like with dignity for all at the center? So, you know, the Catholic worker had a lot of ideas. Peter Morin had a lot of ideas about this. Land and craft society, distributivism, family farms, farming communes, cooperatives, worker-owned collectives. We're gonna just look at some ideas from our farm. And I just wanna be really clear that I've said it already, but you know, the Catholic worker is just part of the big diversity of the world, and our farm is just one little farm, and I don't think that everyone should farm like we do. I'm not even sure that we should farm like we do. So I have a bunch of things about what could be a more personalist farming system. One is humbly listening to the insight and experience from all of our teachers. Modeling our food system after the native ecosystems. Making some space for science and observation and innovation. Biodiversity. I think here's some more biodiversity in our community. Cooperative work. And here's another cooperative work slide. We're planting garlic last fall, and here is the garlic in June. And yeah, just sharing abundance with people and with the creatures of our ecosystem. Okay, so I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I'm gonna, oh wait, here's a slide. There's another slide about prairie. This is Nate, and Nate knows a lot about prairie, and we do a lot of education about native restoration. Here's Allison doing a prairie burn. Sorry, I forgot those. I have all these slides that I forgot about. Okay, I'm going to take you a kind of a quick whirl through our harvest morning. So this is kind of a powerhouse team that we've got on Tuesdays and Fridays. We have these amazing teams that come out to our farm, and yeah, it's just anyway, I'm just going to go through this. So we gather and we make a plan. We have a big list of vegetables. We split up into teams. We head out into the fields. We pick everything that is ripe and ready that day. We bring it back to the pack house, and there it gets washed and weighed and packed up. The packers, here they are, just still working. The rest of us go out. Oh, I also want to say thanks to Kara Grady, who made these slides about our harvest morning. And these 3 hours, so Tuesday and Friday mornings are some of the 3 most intense hours on the farm. And everybody that came gets to go home with a big box of vegetables. I'm just whipping through these slides. I hope you don't mind. And then we have, so a bunch goes home with our workers, and then we have a lot of other food. And so we sell some of this food to cover the farm's general expenses. And the rest is getting shared with a lot of different partners. We work with a lot of amazing partners. And then some of it is eaten here on the farm. So it's just a little picture of us, our pack house after harvest. Now it's a kitchen. And here is a little newsletter that we send out with the vegetables also. Okay. Now we're back to Dorothy Day and Peter Morin. Remembering here we are Catholic workers trying to build a society where it's easier for people to be good. And yeah, so just kind of holding on to that. What is that society like? That one thing I think is cool about the Catholic worker is not just one answer. We have so many different houses and communities that are all trying different ways. And just like we are just part of this big landscape of so many different amazing ideas. Here's a big slide with lots of stuff on it. And I would love to talk about economics a lot. And I'm excited. There's looks like 2 great roundtables tomorrow about economics. You should all go to all the roundtables tomorrow. I think that economic theory has been a part of the Catholic worker from the beginning. Always this critique both of capitalism and communism, and advocating for a creative third way. And the other half of this slide is kind of about that Catholic worker farmers have skills. We've been working to produce goods and services for people, community, ecosystems, and the planet. If it is ever safe to travel again, I invite folks to visit the farms. Many of us want to share our skills. We want to learn from you. We love learning from each other. And I think that there are a lot of things that could be taken, that can be useful outside of the rural context, but everywhere. So here's my agronomic university slide. And so this is me at the first craft retreat. I'm learning how to make candles from Brenna, and then some Advent candles we made last year. So kind of taking that and doing a little project of something that we're sharing with our community. Again, learn how to weave rugs from Betsy. And now we're weaving here. This is this ridiculous endeavor that I'm on right now. Super fun, you know, and super exciting to imagine a local garment and fiber economy. But I just want to say there's so much work in this. It is definitely not a big, quick get rich scheme. Again, the newspapers, as mentioned by one of our previous speakers, I think that this is an economic, this is a gift that many Catholic worker houses are offering to our greater world. And this Catholic worker farmer paper doesn't come out very often, but I swear to you, I want to do one this winter. So if you are a Catholic worker farmer and want to write, contact me. Somebody wants to put that mustard seed bee in the chat so you guys can remember it. If you want to receive this, let me know. And if you have moved since the last time we printed it, please let me know. Okay, this is the last thing I want to talk about. This is just a thing we do on our farm. We share our consolations and desolations. So what is hard on the farm? I just want to say it is hard to be a farmer. It is hard to be a farmer during climate change. Yeah, so I heard that farmers have the highest suicide rate in the United States and in the world. So it just is hard to be a farmer, and that was like before climate change. So yeah, it's hard to be a farmer during climate change. So much work, so much learning. I love learning and I like working. And I just didn't know that it would be so much learning and so much work. So many rabbits. What gives me joy? Sharing delicious things. Fun, music, learning, sharing beauty, healthy plants, the sky and the weather. And all right, I'm just gonna say this thing. So the big question I had, so I was like, why do I want to be a farmer during climate change? I often say, why am I still a farmer? It's hard to be a farmer. And why during climate change? Because it's such a hard, it's so stressful. And then I think, like, I love this world, and what else would I be doing? Like, where can I, there's like nowhere to go that I can hide from climate change. And like, why not be right here, right in the middle of it, present and accompanying our planet at this time? Like, as things are changing, as things pass away, it's an honor to be here in this beautiful world with my eyes wide open and my heart breaking. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. And finally, what gives me joy is community. and all of you. And I just thank you so much. That's me. I'm done.
Thank you, Alice. Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yep, we can hear you, Michelle.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alice. That was beautiful, and you definitely embody the vision and the work that it takes to become that vision. So we are actually in really good time here. We have about 40 minutes, and we're going to open it up for people to make comments, ask questions. We just ask that you keep that kind of limited if you can. And then just again, I want to kind of like read off those 3 questions because there was so much in these presentations tonight that will be food for thought when we address these questions tomorrow. So how are Catholic workers digging into our roots to work with other movements that are led by people of color and youth as examples? How are we responding to the presence of deadly weapons at protests? And in the midst of a collapsing society, how are we preparing for the new society within the shell of the old? So just tuck those into your mind for tomorrow, and then we'll open it up now for comments, questions. Thank you all, the panelists that spoke.
And if you'd like to speak, we ask that you please write your name in the chat so we can call on you, and that way we don't have everyone unmuting at the same time. So if you'd like to ask a question or offer a thought, please go ahead and write your name in the chat. If that feels really hard, you can unmute yourself and just give us a note that you'd like to say something. I guess I can start if that would be a helpful thing. Alice, I really appreciated that as you do this work, you recognize the history of the land that you're on. And I guess, I'm curious how you think, what does it look like in this moment as these uprisings have been happening and we've been a greater attention to the history of racial injustice in our country and the current racial injustice in farmland?
What was, I heard the frame. What was the actual question?
I'm thinking of how the uprisings of this moment, what does look like in a rural setting, in a setting that you were talking about the indigenous roots of the land, recognizing that this last couple of months has maybe looked different where you are than in some of the urban centers where a lot of Catholic workers are, and just like, what does racial justice work looked like in your neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, yeah, I mean, it's been a weird year. I think everything has been different this year from any other year. This year, yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is something that we are wanting to be really good at, but I don't know that we are. Yes, I don't have a super good answer. I think that for us this year, we really focused just in the midst of a pandemic to try to say, like, what is our most essential work? And we really tried to focus this year on growing food and to try to support all the folks in need and all the movements, like, by sharing food. And yeah, I don't know. I don't have a beautiful answer to that. I think that this is just something that I don't know. It's a huge question. There's so much there, and there's so much to be learned. Yeah, I don't.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. I see Gail Johnson's name in the chat. Gail, if you'd like to speak.
I don't know if people can see me. I just wanted to say that Black, Brown, and Indigenous people have been the last to, have been really tromped on by the system. And I see them being tromped on it again with the spread of COVID, and it's hitting what they quote unquote call essential workers. And most of the essential workers are people who work at a grocery store, drive a taxi cab, et cetera. And those people are being hit by COVID really, really bad. And so I think people have the realization that they've talked about it, but I don't see people saying, when the vaccine comes, we're going to give it to the, the community that is impacted the most. And so I see that people are talking about the different communities that have been undermined by so much economic injustice and just racial inequality and just, pretty much depressed by the powers that be. But then when it actually comes to doing something, they fall short. And I've seen the movement start and I'm really happy about it. But my concern is are the people in power now going to listen to what the young people are saying? And then, how do we align with them? I mean, I'm not a person of color, so I don't feel like I can represent them, but I want to be an ally to them. So I just don't know how to do that and how other people done that in Catholic worker communities. I mean, I don't know, even farming. I mean, I think food inequality is really, we had food deserts where people can't get like a piece of fruit for like 3 miles, or, they have to go to like across town. And so, they'll buy a bag of potato chips or something, I mean, how do we address that we try to address it, but I don't know. I throw it out there.
I see Carla's name, but would anyone like to offer a response or some thoughts?
I would like to say something, and I'm good friends with Gail, and I'm struck in this pandemic by kind of the juxtaposition of the pandemic and the political divide at the same time. And there are people who are dying, and the only person to be with them is a nurse, because hospitals are off limits because of the risk of spreading the virus. So relatives, obviously, as you all probably know, can't be there. And it strikes me what's emerging in these times is another pillar, like seeking justice and being witness to the injustice and the problems in the world is kind of one pillar of moving forward for a better world. Another pillar is certainly witnessing the pains and the sufferings that others have, and even doing it sometimes when there's nothing we can do directly to solve it. Like a nurse being beside someone who's dying of COVID, or someone who supports Trump and kind of hates the arrogance of the perceived arrogance of the coastal elites, as it gets called. And in my experience, it's quite powerful to just get someone else's suffering, to witness where someone else is at. That's transformative. And I'm kind of have a vision of clearing the way for people to do good. And certainly one of those pillars for doing that is witnessing someone else getting where someone else is at. Often that's all someone needs. And when that happens, they kind of wake up. I see people wake up, move forward, do things to make the world better, be more themselves. It's a powerful thing, compassionately witnessing others. And there's a bit of a movement for this going on, but it's a way too small a thing in the world right now. That's what I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Len. anyone else like to respond to that question? Or that
Hi.
prediction? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Emmanuel. I'm from Detroit, and I'm a resident at Day House. But I just wanted to just chime in a bit about, the reality of food deserts. So Detroit is considered a food desert, and it's interesting. I've been doing urban agriculture work probably since like 2016, kind of like more hardcore, and a lot of I work primarily in the past. I've worked primarily with LGBTQ folks of color in Detroit, and it's been interesting just kind of like navigating the disinterest in community around even wanting to focus on practices of urban agriculture and biocultural diversity, which I understand to be a direct link to systemic oppression and how it just creates so many psychological and physical barriers within our communities to be able to elevate beyond our reality, the harsh reality of food deserts and things as other harmful things as a result of oppression. So I think I think it's really important when we talk about when we look at just it's just I don't even know, there's so many gaps to be bridged as I'm noticing, because I'm continuing to look at solutions to various issues within my own communities. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to just share that a little bit, and I guess I'm still pondering, but I just wanted to share that a little bit.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I see Carla Dawson's name in the chat.
Hello?
Hello.
Alice? Willa? Robert, thank you guys for that opening panel. That was lovely. But I would like to say, as a person who's been involved at the Catholic Worker for all of my adult life, I think Catholic workers sometimes don't want to sit with the pain. We're fixers, we're healers. But sometimes you have to sit with the pain of what's going on in our world. Actually, let's start with what's going on in our community, in the houses we live in and with the people we live in. And try to recognize that we need to heal ourselves so we can heal others. And I know that's hard to say and it's really harder to do, but I think during this time of COVID, I have really thought about my life. And I look back on the 30 years that I have been with the Catholic Worker, and I am so thankful that I've had communities that have held me up, helped me raise my boys, helped me through my boy being in prison. But the pain is there, and we need to sit with it. And if there's something that's going on, you can get through it, but it doesn't mean like it's going to be better tomorrow. But you have to get through it to get on the other side of it. So I'm really glad that they're doing this Zoom Catholic Worker gathering. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carla.
I noticed Mike Wisniewski had a question for Michelle. I can't get back to the question on my chat, so I don't know if, Mike, if you're willing to ask it out loud or if somebody else can read it.
I can read it.
Oh, there you go. Thanks.
I'm very concerned, I think we all are, with the way things are in this nation and the way things are in this world. And I'm wondering, what can we as a movement do to have a stronger stand against empire and ushering Peter's vision of creating a new society in the shell of the old? Is a nonviolent revolution possible in this violent and highly divided society? And if it is that our part? Are we to stand in leadership of bringing people together and ushering in a society that is more compassionate and loving. Your thoughts?
Was this question specifically to me?
Well, to you and anyone else that wants to address it.
Okay. I can just give a little stab at it because it's something I've been thinking about. And one of the things I think about is that I don't know that we really have a leadership role. I think that we have something to offer. I think that our, like our background, our teachings, our ancestors, our direct roots, we bring something to offer, but I don't think that we can do it alone. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things for the Catholic worker is to kind of learn how to walk in partnership with this very diverse world that we live in. We're impacted differently, and we play a role in the in both how we heal, and we play a role in how we have aided in this kind of destruction, in this breakdown. And I think we have a lot to learn from each other. And so I have a lot of gratitude and thanks and respect for the young people, particularly in the Midwest, that where I am right now. I see a tremendous number of young people who are struggling with, not afraid to struggle with, the issues of oppression, racism, white supremacy, all of these issues that I think it's harder for older and white Catholic workers to address. And I think that some of the things that some of the discussions that they've opened up, which has caused a lot of pain, and looking at all these things, like I think I have a lot of gratitude for their persistence on helping some of us older people to expand our understanding of our place in the world. Is there a place for a nonviolent revolution? I hope so. I think that's, I mean, it seems to me that that's something that spans, that's kind of spans the generations, and I think that we can do that, and I think we will do that. I think we have a lot of still listening and learn to, and learning how to. And I guess another thing that I feel about the U.S. population, we've grown up with this kind of idea that, materialism and individualism, it's embedded in us so deeply. And when you go to another culture, another place, you can see it a lot more clearly. And I think that is a big thing that we need to look at. So those are my thoughts, and I'm sure other people have thoughts as well. But it's a good, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Michelle. And thanks, Mike. It's a big question that obviously we could focus solely on the whole night. So thanks for posing it. And maybe we can chew on that tomorrow in our small groups. Daniel, we saw your name earlier.
Can you hear me, Matt?
You're great.
Okay. As you can see, I'm wearing a free speech t-shirt. I was a librarian. I've been a librarian, and I participated in the free speech movement in Berkeley, so it's very important to me. and I'm going to be very brief. There were 6 of us who proposed a panel for tomorrow. We were concerned about essential workers and other particularly vulnerable groups. And we were going to speak from our experience on nonviolent healthcare, particularly nutrition. And we were going to touch on defending ourselves from the corrupt aspects of modern establishment medicine. The committee was afraid that this subject would be too sensitive a subject for you all. And so it was canceled. That's about it. I just want people to know that in case they want to say anything at this point. I did suggest some accommodations like putting it before the group tonight, whether they wanted to hear it or not. But the committee didn't have time to talk about it or have second thoughts. So thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Daniel. Leave the floor for a moment in case anyone wanted to respond.
I will respond. I've been a friend of Daniel for years, and this disagreement has made all of us very sad.
Rosalie, will you move your microphone down to your mouth?
I've been a friend of Daniel for years, and this disagreement, when we decided not to offer a panel which used, which criticized conventional medical wisdom on the COVID pandemic. As someone who tested positive and was blessedly not very sick, I remain tremendously conscious of the people who have lost family, relatives, children, particularly people of color, to COVID. And we felt as a planning committee that we could not have a panel that proposed things that were so counter to accepted medical practice as wearing masks. I think if this were Sugar Creek, we could have worked to include a variety of medical approaches. We could have asked Dr. Michelle Byrne, who was a member of SUCASA for years and is still very close to the community, practicing in a Black community in the south of Chicago. And we could have had Kathy Boylan, who is very much against all the conventional medical things. And we could have had Dan giving his beautiful knowledge of how to eat healthily to live a good life. But there wasn't time for us to be able to craft this. And frankly, we were just worried that people, this is such a public thing. I mean, anybody that wants to come to this can register, that people would be receiving information that might harm them physically and cause them to die. And that's the main reason we canceled this. I'm so sorry it happened. And I think it's just one of the fallouts of the fact that we can't meet together and can't have it out and can't look each other in the eye and say, look, let's compromise. So we're all very sorry it happened, and it just did. So, you know, there are so often in a Catholic worker house of hospitality when decisions have to be made that hurt people, particularly when you have to ask a guest or a community member to leave because the whole of the community is hurt. And this is how I felt when this happened. And we all did. And that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalie, for taking some space to answer that question. I see Bud's hand.
Hi, Bud McAllister, New London. Sorry, I got in late, so I just wanted to go back to what Michelle was addressing. I see, as crazy as things are, as insane as things are, I see nothing but opportunity and hope. We're, obviously at a huge point in transition time, which I call evolutionary consciousness. I just started with a group the other night. It's based on the Tao of physics. It's mysticism where science, art, and religion meet. And I do think it's possible to have a peaceful revolution. I think the seeds for this were planted a long time ago. In 1933 in particular was a fascinating year, which I just started looking at. The GOP tried to take over the government, the rise of Hitler, and the beginning of the Catholic worker paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Bud. Brenna, I believe you were next.
Thanks. Matt, earlier you asked Alice about what does sort of anti-racism work or response to all of these beautiful uprisings taking place in the country look like in rural Iowa. And I live pretty close to rural Iowa. I live right across the border in Wisconsin. And Alice and I talk about these things a lot. And she had just finished giving an incredible presentation for 20 minutes. And probably, anyway, so I just wanted to back her up on that one. Since we're both farmers, though Alice spends a lot more time growing tons more food than we do here at St. Isidore Farm. We grow some food, and then we also really, in a huge privileged way, we have a lot of extra time to do other things like workshops and things. And in large thanks to the St. Louis Catholic worker that brought the awareness to the Midwest Catholic workers several years ago about our need to undergo anti-racism training as a Catholic worker movement. We really followed their lead. We learned a lot from what the St. Louis Catholic worker was calling us to. And one of the learnings that I and others in my community and in the Midwest Catholic worker, a lot of white members of the Catholic worker, especially who live in rural areas. I think one of our takeaways is that it's really important for white people, to listen to voices of color, and then go into spaces where we have a lot of access to, like our churches. We have, the Catholic worker movement. Though we have been on the cutting edge of a lot of things for a long time, we've actually gained a lot of respect and have become more and more of a respected institution in some ways. There's a lot of places in my area where I live in a very Catholic area near Dubuque, Iowa. So when someone from my community, from the Catholic workers, speaks, a lot of people listen to what we have to say. So we've tried to bring anti-racism discussions and to white areas. I live in an area that is like 95% white. So it's really important, I think, for us to be talking to other white people about how racism has yeah, their role, our own role in racism and how racism has impacted their lives, and then trying to help other white folks see the importance of to showing up to protests and led by people of color. So I think the Catholic worker has that's like a role that we can play. We're good at being activists, and we can there's a lot of people who will listen to us, so getting more people on board. Also, living rurally, I was grateful that Alice introduced herself with the land that she's from. Here at St. Isidore, we're on Ho-Chunk and Meskwaki homeland, and we've been trying to learn a lot about what that means, and how we came to acquire this land. And we're in conversation with others, kind of trying to lead a growing movement in this area to talk about what would repairing the harm that was done look like. What does that mean? Land return? Does that mean some payment of some kind? Does that mean just showing up to support Indigenous led movements here? So yeah, it looks different than in the city, but I think in the country we still have a role to play. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Brenna.
Maybe just give it a time check. It's 10 to 8, and we still have 10 minutes if we want to try to close it down at 8 o'clock, and then come back again tomorrow morning to continue this great conversation. So still have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Michelle. And I see Kara Grady is next on our list.
Hi, thank you, Matt. God, I'm really nervous. And I'll try to keep this short. But kind of going back to Mike's question and what Michelle was addressing, I feel like one of the best ways to help out this movement is to educate more people about it. I've grown up Catholic my whole life, and the first time I ever heard about the Catholic worker was when a friend of mine handed me a flyer that said, "Go intern at Mustard Seed Farm." It was a completely life-changing experience. And Alice can back me up on that. We had lots of pointed discussions on theology, on racism, on everything. And it really began to show me just like how pounded into my head industrialization and capitalism have been, but also that there's a different way, a better way, a way where manual labor is not degrading, but dignified, a good way to live, a way to be in community. And I hope I can spend the rest of my life showing other people that there is this other way. And I think that's what makes the Catholic worker such a blessing and such a wonderful institution. Thanks.
That was great. Thank you so much, Kara. I see Gail's name.
Gail's again. I just wanted to say that I think that the Catholic workers' homes are so diverse. I mean, there's a place in that has families host single people, and do hospitality that way. And then, it's just so diverse, the way people, see their personalism, or the way they feel that their kindness or the acts of mercy needs to be. But I think that we all share the common bond that we want to see, a place where people can, create a place where people can do good, and so that they can also access whatever it is that they need, food, healthcare, housing, things like that. So, I think that, even though we're so diverse, we have so much in common that we could kind of like share that commonality to maybe work within our own communities. I don't think at a national level I don't see that happening, but I mean, there's so many communities of people, if they start in their own community, like the woman was describing her work with dealing with the threats of racism in a mainly 93% white community. I mean, that was something, it sounded very positive that she's trying to do to deal with that sort of issue in light of what's happening in the world. And so I think that each of us can do it in our own way, and we have to look for the hope in the way that we can actually do it in our own communities, but maybe talking about like how we do it, and maybe that sort of like organizing. But I think each community is so different. It's sort of hard to like say, what's happening in Iowa is so much different. I'm on the East Coast. It's so much of a different approach to what's actually happening, but there are some commonalities that we could get around and really focus on and like really take it to our own communities. Because I think we know a lot about our own communities. So many people have lived there 30, 40 years and they know their community. It's just that some of us have, and I hate to say this, have become insular in that we've established our communities and we don't kind of go down the hill and talk to the people who might have a different perspective on that from us. And so I think that dialogue needs to happen too. But it's hard because when you feel so strongly about this is the way that you've lived your life, and then talking to somebody who might have different values it's a struggle. And so I don't know. I offer that. I'm sorry I talked twice, so I'll keep it short.
Thank you, Gail. Appreciate to recognize the commonalities and the differences for sure. Colin Madsen.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So I guess my what I wanted to say is more directed back to how the Catholic worker can be an anti-racist movement. This is actually my first really anything with the Catholic worker movement. So if I say something out of line, that's fine. Let me know. So I really want to get involved. This is my first time being here. But just when thinking about like how the Catholic worker can be an anti-racist movement, a lot of people have talked about like really white people and people of color getting together and really talking and having a community of love where we can talk about the issues going on, which is like obviously so agreeable and what we need to do in this world. But I'm a college student and I think there's a lot of really great insights from scholars and intellectuals, anti-racist scholars. I know at my university, in the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies program, like some of those people, I mean, they're not intellectual elitists. They are really devoting their whole lives to anti-racist theory and praxis and how to actually be anti-racist in life. And that's what they devote their entire lives to. And I don't want to misrepresent Peter Marr in any way, but I think he did have a sort of vision of people in the communities being in connection with people in the universities and that back and forth of how we can learn from the scholars to lead our practical activities in being anti-racist. And I guess I would just want to end this statement by saying like, is the Catholic worker movement doing that? Are we getting involved with anti-racist scholars and people that are devoting their lives to a different sort of anti-racist work than the Catholic worker movement is, which is more hands-on in the communities versus the scholars who are doing a lot of theorizing and historical research and these things. So I guess it's more of a question and than a statement too, but just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Colin. I think it is important to hold that there's a lot of different intelligences and knowledges, and we need a little bit of all of them, and we need to know which ones have been centered for a long time and which ones have been ignored for a long time. Appreciate that. I see Mike Boover's name. I don't know if it's a response or the next question, but want to respect your time.
Hi, folks. Greetings from Massachusetts and from the East Coast. This old part of the country. Just want to say a word of gratitude for all the work and all the speakers, and a sense of great reverence for the tradition, and just having a feeling of and hearing you all of our being in kind of a liminal place, a place between the old and the new, and not always sure what is going to emerge, but thinking about all our communities, the houses of hospitality, the farms, the folks in the resistance communities that continue to carry that very important banner, to take heart, and just glad to be part of that. We're carrying on here at Worcester as best we can. So we're in solidarity with you all at the Mustard Seed and the St. Francis and Therese. And also to remind ourselves that, to quote Emily Dickinson, that hope is a thing with feathers. You know, continue to fly. Yeah, keep the vision.
Thank you so much, Michael. It is 5:57. I do not believe that I see any more names in the chat, although I'm sure we could continue talking for hours. There will be opportunities tomorrow for small group breakouts and roundtable discussions. Rosalie dropped my email address in the chat. If you or anyone you know is having problems or questions, please reach out. But otherwise, I will pass it to whomever is closing us for this evening.
I'm not sure that we picked someone to close us out for the evening.
I picked you, Michelle. We picked you.
Maybe that falls on me. And so, yeah, it's been a really rich evening with lots and lots of great history, great insights. We have a lot ahead of us. We're facing some really crazy times. And I think if anything for me, that I feel that our strength is in recognizing, or at least in trying to recognize the spirit that lives amongst us and that speaks to us, and that we can listen to that spirit with the ear of our heart, which is one of the Benedictine highlights, is listening with the ear of one's heart. And from what I've learned, Dorothy was a Benedictine oblate, and so I think that these are pieces of our strength that we can draw on, and that we can share as we go forward as a world community, facing some incredible times. And I think I also want to just kind of like highlight something, Alice, that you said, that it's exciting to be in the world at this time. I think that we picked to be in the world at this time, and so to be able to embrace that and find our way through this time, and find it with hope and with joy, and all the things that you shared, is extremely important. And that we have each other to remind us of that, is a real blessing as we move forward in the world, and we move forward into our evening, back into our little world of isolation until we meet again tomorrow. So thank you, everyone, from our youngest member and newest member who spoke up tonight, to our members who have been part of this movement for many, many generations. Thank you. Was that okay?
Amen and a women.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to say goodbye to folks.
Amen. Amen and a women.
Good night.
Good night, Alice.
Night, everybody.
Stay with
Good
y'all.
night, everyone tomorrow.
Good night, everyone.
See you
Thank you,
tomorrow.
everybody.
Take care.
Bye, Alice.
Goodbye, Gail. Goodbye, Cal.
Bye, Gabby Workers.
Bye,
Young boy.
Nice job, team. Nice job.
Really good.
Thank you for all you did.
Care yourselves.
Okay, you ready? Yep.
Good night, Frida.
God bless everyone. Good
Yeah,
night.
great job,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, organizers. Thank
Take care.
you.
Hey, Catherine.
Rochester.
How you doing, Ian? It's Catherine. I mean, Gail.
I have no idea how to sign off of this thing.
Gail, you got to remember your own name.
I know.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks,
No
Matt.
problem. Got it
Thank
worked
you.
out.
Thank you, Willa.
Thank you, Willa.
Thank you, all speakers.
Thank you, Robert.
Cal
Thank you,
Robertson.
Robert.
Stephen. Say it now.
Catherine.
Hi.
Hey, Los Angeles.
Cool, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
I changed my name. My name's Claire. Now.
Love you, Catherine.
I'm honored to have you
Hi,
represent.
Catherine.
Hi, Rosalie. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Catherine, great to see you. I know you're only 30 feet away, but
Catherine.
so we can keep this open for a couple of minutes if people want to chat, or if folks are done for the evening, we can close it down and send everyone home.
Well, Matt, you've just done a wonderful job.
You all did the hard work.
No, you did.
All the hard work for me came in the last 3 weeks. It's been smooth sailing today.
Y'all did great.
Fluffy wants to say hi, Fluffy. Say hi.
All right. Well, y'all have a lovely evening, and hopefully we'll see some of y'all tomorrow.
Good night.
Thank you for
Take care.
moderating.
See y'all tomorrow. Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Bye,
See you
everyone.
tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.